All right. Good morning, everybody. Today is Daf Mem Vav Maseches Eruvin. So we left off yesterday discussing, I guess, regarding Machlokas. When Shabbos starts, it could be Shabbos starts. Is there Erev Techumen on objects? And if they are, maybe you can't move them. So we want to know, perhaps rainwater, right? Why the rainwater? Why is that not considered to be an object that basically starts Shabbos one place and therefore can't be moved a certain distance, whether you hold it's 4 amos or you hold it's 2,000 amos, or whatever the halach is. So we had the rainwater. So we had a whole question with the rain and the clouds, and shouldn't be part of the ocean, and therefore it's far from the ocean. It's outside of Tchum. So he said no, it's in the clouds, and we said, oh, okay, well, the clouds, so it comes down. So the Gemara says, no, the clouds, maybe it's new, right? So the Gemara asks on top of Mem Vav, Amid Aleph, top line, if that's the case, if they're new, Kol Shkein Dahavilu Noilad, that's serious. For sure they should be Noilad. So Ella, rather, we left off, top line, Mem Vav, Amid Aleph, Maya, Be'avim, Mined, Naidi. The water is constantly moving in the clouds, right? It's not still, and therefore only something that can get makom shvisa is something that is stationary. But if something is moving, the particles are moving, then it would not establish a makom shvisa yet. And Hashdas, the Hachanali said this, Ukainas nami. Our whole question was, hey, the water came from the ocean, which is far away. It's more than 2,000 amos, should be yaser. So even in that case, since we say Hashdas l'hachi onkas nami lo tiksha l'cha, can't ask there why my bunkanas nami minad naidi. It also moves. Vitanya, we learn in a brayso naharois hamoishchein mainos hanovin, where you have rivers that flow and springs that come up. Harehen karagli kol adam. Those do not establish a makom shvisa as to where they are. Rather, whoever draws them, whoever takes that hefker water, that ownerless water, it was ownerless from before Shabbos, and he takes that water can go wherever that person goes. So wherever that person's makom shvisa is, that's what the water, he establishes it, because the water never established its own makom shvisa. Now, Amar Rabbi Yaakov Bar Idi, Amar Rabbi Shuban Levi, Halacha Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri. The halacha is like Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri. Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, right, comes from our Mishnah. The first part of our Mishnah on Mem Hey Amud Aleph. So it says over there on the bottom, what was the machlokas? A person was sleeping. A person was sleeping, and he wakes up, and it also on his Shabbos. So Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri says he gets 2,000 amos. He establishes makom shvisa, and Chachamim say no, he only gets daled amos. So the halacha is like Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, that we say that he gets 2,000 amos despite the fact that he was sleeping and he didn't have in mind that, hey, this is going to be my makom shvisa. He slept through the beginning of Shabbos. So Amar le Rabbi Yaakov Bar Yidi beferish milacha umichlal shmilacha. Did you hear them say beferish halachas like Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, or did you just infer from a case? So Amar le beferish mili. I know I heard beferish. Says okay, fine. So the Gemara says curiously, the Gemara says my klal. Okay, what was the klal? What was the inference? Perhaps that you drew it from. Then Rabbi Shuban Levi halacha kedivrei hamekel be'eruv. The halacha is like, whenever there's a machlokas by Eruvin, the halacha is like the one who is mekel when it comes to Eruvin, because since Eruvin is a derabanan. So the halacha is like, now remember, a person sleeps when Shabbos starts, and then he wakes up, right? So the halacha is like Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, that is a kula, right? He gets 2,000 amos as opposed to just Dalet amos, right? It's a kula. So we say, so maybe I would have thought that since the halacha is like the divrei mekelin, so therefore maybe that was inferred. So the Gemara says, okay, if that's the case, you've heard befavorish for tarti lamali. So why do you need both to say the halacha is like the divrei mekel be'eruvin and also the halacha is like Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri in this case? Samar Reb Zera tzricha, you need it. Why? Diashmin halacha Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri. If you said halacha ben Nuri have a mina, maybe I would have thought bein the kula bein the chumra. Both the kula and the chumra. The kula is obviously the case of the individual. All right, the individual is sleeping and he gets 2,000 amos. That's a kula. But what's the chumra? The chumra is an object, right? If I have my these are muksa, right? But if I have this cup that was right, and it was ownerless before Shabbos and it was sitting here, so according to some say that objects don't have makom shvisa and they can go wherever, whoever picks it up, they can go wherever, right? There's no makom shvisa for objects. And Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, right, who learns a sleeping person from objects, says no, objects only get 2,000 amos. They can't go wherever who picks them up. So therefore, what do you see from there? So that would be a chumrah, right, when it comes to Eruvin. So maybe if we were to say halach like Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, I would have thought that maybe even chumrah when it comes to objects. So Kamash Malon, therefore it says halacha the mekel be'erev. Therefore it says halacha is like the one who's mekel when it comes to erevin. I v'lema halacha divrei mekel be'erev. So okay, so just say that flat out. The halacha is like the one who's mekel by erevin. Halacha Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri lamali. Why do you need to say the halacha is like Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri? So lamali. So yitzrich no, you still need. So now we're going to give 3 terutzim, 1 now and then 2 later on. We'll and I'll point them out. So why? What is the? Why did you need to say halacha Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri as opposed to just saying halacha kedivrei hamekel be'erev? So we need it. So Rabbi. Maybe when we say it's basically the machlokes is 1 verse 1 or many verse many. But over here, when you have a yachid, Rabbi Yochanan Nuri versus the Rabbim versus the Chachamim, maybe you'd say, okay, the halacha is not like Rabbi Yochanan Nuri. The halacha is like the Rabbim because halacha yachid Rabbim halacha Rabbim. So therefore, you have to teach us that even in this case, halacha is like the yachid and not the rabbin. So I understand. Erevin is darabanan. Mali yachid b'makom yachid. Mali yachid b'makom rabbin. Says Rava, I understand. Since it's a din darabanan, what does it make a difference if it's 1 verse 1 or 1 verse many? The halacha should always be right. Since it's a halacha darabanan, we should go lekula. So Rav Papa asks, questioning Rava's assumption, but wait, we don't differentiate, right? In the case of the Rabbanan between a Yachid and a Rabbim and a Yachid and a Yachid. About Tanah, we learn in the Mishnah, Rabbi Eliezer, I believe. Rabbi, where's the bait? No, maybe not. Yeah, no. Yeah, Rabbi Eliezer, yeah. The Bach. Right, so he says, Rabbi Eliezer Aimer, Kol Isha Sha'avru Aleh Shleish Anos. So let's say if a woman, she missed her period and she missed 3 times. So normally the halach is that a woman, right, when she sees, and there's a suffix when she finally sees it, she sees, let's say, on a garment. So we say you go back in time, midrabanan, right? So there's a halach midrabanan. You go back in time to say the last 24 hours that anything she touched, she would have been tummy, because we don't know, because since she didn't feel the flow, right? The only way she knew she was tamei was from finding it on her clothing. So we say, well, when did it start? I don't know. So we go back 24 hours. So 24 hours midrabanan, we say we go machmer. But if a woman missed 3 periods in a row, right? So then she establishes that we don't go backwards anymore because she's assumed not to have. So therefore, you don't go backwards in time. If she does go ahead and find it, then it's only from this point and on. Now, so it's called dayashat. So he said, Dayashat. But Tani learned Brisa, Maisav also Rabbi Eliezer. One time there was a Maisa, and Rebbe acted, right, Lakula, right, and he said Dayashata, even though despite the fact that she missed, right, her 3 periods, nevertheless, you went Lakula and says, even though she touched something within the last 24 hours, it's still Tahor. So La'acha Shenizker. So and Rebbe went like Rabbi Yezer, the Achashiniska. Kadahu Rabbi Elazar lismach aleh b'shas tzchak. So he says, no, even though he forgot, and he says, nevertheless, even though I ruled like Rabbi Yezer, it was fine that I ruled like Rabbi Yezer in this case because it was a shas hatchak, right? Shas hatchak, there wasn't a lot of food, there wasn't a lot of taharos, so therefore it was mutter to go ahead and to rely upon this makel opinion. Now, my liachashiniska, what does it mean? After he recalled, right? After he recalled, he says, you know what? It's fine to use this kula. If the halacha was not like Rabbi Elazar, if the halacha is not like Rabbi Elazar, and he says, okay, you can hold like Rabbi Elazar. So how could you say, oh, you can be samech on him? If we know the halacha is not like him, then it was wrong, right? Shas tzchak or not shas tzchak, right? If we pass in the other way, you can't go that way. So Ella, it must be karabanan b'shas tzchak. Rather, it must be a case of the Rabbanan El Karabanan. Rather, it must be so if you say the halacha is like Rabbi Elazar, so there it will be fine. So it doesn't make a difference. But if you say the halacha is like Rabbanan, how could you do like him? You can't go connect halacha just because it's Shas Tzchak. So Ella, rather, rather the halacha was said. There wasn't a psak, not like the Rabbanan and not like Rabbi Elazar. And therefore, what happened? The lav yachid poligala, right? Ella rabim and poligala, and rather, what happened? He realized that, oh my gosh, in this case, since there's no psak, it's yachid v'rabim. Even though it's derabanan, the halacha should be like the rabim, even though it's l'chumra, right? But he said, however, since it was a shas adchak, therefore you could rely on the kula. Mashma, if it wasn't Shas HaDachak and it's a Darabanan, you go L'chumra. So you see, there is a difference even when it comes to Darabanans between Yachid the Yachid or Yachid versus Rabbin. If it's Yachid versus Rabbin, even if it's L'chumra, you should go like the Chumra, right? Rabin Poliga is Amar Kedai Rabbi Elazar Lismar Chalev Shas HaDachak. Therefore, only in that case it was proper to be Samech. So therefore, you see, there's a proof that even when it comes to Darabanans, that Yachid or Rabbin, you should go like the Rabbin unless it's a Shas HaDachak. And Amar of Masharshia. However, it says Rav Masharshia l'Rava. Family, someone say Rav Nachman Bar Yisrael l'Rava ubi d'Rabbanan. Once again, with Ran Lo Shani bein Yachid b'makom Yachid and Yachid b'makom Rabbin. There's no difference between a Yachid and a Yachid versus a Yachid and Rabbin in a case of d'Rabbanans. But Tanya learned in Brayso Shemua Karoiva Noheges Shiva Ushloshim. If one heard basically immediately about one's relative passing away, so he sits Shiva for 7 days, and then he also has a mourning period of Shloshim and Rechaika. However, if it's Rechaika, if it's far away, in other words, if it comes after time, right? There's only 1 day of mourning, right? There's no Shiva, right, as we call it, the 7 days, and there's no 30, there's no Shloshim, rather there's only Yom Echad. Ezi, Krova, Ezi, Rechaika, what's the definition of Krova, Ezi, Rechaika? So besides Shloshim, Krova, if it's within 30 days, that's called Krova, that's called, you hear it soon after the Maisa. But if you only hear about the person's, that he was Nifter after 30 days, that is considered to be Rechaika, that is considered to be a distance. Divi Rabbi Kiva. That's the opinion of Rabbi Kiva. Whether you heard it within 30 days or you heard it after 30 days, no haggis shiva o shloshim. Right? You always have 7 days and 30 days. So clearly, the chamim here are lechumra. Right? So the chamim here are lechumra, and this is din d'Rabbanan. Right? And Rabbi Kiva says, no, you only keep 1 day if you heard the news after 30 days. Now. So he is Lakula, and anytime you have one versus many, one person is Mekil, right? And the Rabbim are Machmir, Halacha Kedivrei HaMachmir HaMerubim, right? You go after the Rov who are Machmir. So in other words, even though it's a Din D'Rabbanan, you go after the Rov, right? Even though they're machmir, chutz mizu, except for this one case, Shalfi Rabbi Kiva mekel b'chamim machmir. Even though Rabbi Kiva is mekel, he says you only keep 1 day for Shmuel Rechoika, and chamim are machmir. Halacha kadiv Rabbi Kiva. The halacha is like Rabbi Kiva because this is the case of avelus. And avelus are mekel. V'sarla Shmuel, v'sarla Kishmuel. He holds like Shmuel. Diamar Shmuel. Halacha kadiv Rabbi mekel ba'avel b'avelus. Right? The halacha is the one who's mekel by avelus. So by Avelus Huda Kilu, by Rabbanan. So we see over here that only by Avelus, right, a special din, by Avelus we say, okay, you go after the Yachid. Aval B'Alma, but in general, a din Rabbanan, Afilu B'Drabbanan, Shani Ben Yachid B'Makom Yachid, Ben Yachid B'Makom Rabbin. But with other din Rabbanan, we see there's a difference between Yachid B'Rabbim, Yachid B'Yachid, Yachid B'Rabbim. You go after the Rabbim, even the Machmirin, and only if it's Yachid B'Yachid, then you paskin like Lakula. In that case, the Rav. So turn the page. I'm a base. The Rav Papa Amar and Rav Papa would say to that. Eat strich. No. You have to tell me there. Now, going back. Okay, so that was that case. Now, as I mentioned before, there was going to be 3 terutzim when it came to the shaila of why do you have to go ahead and say halacha Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, right? That you basically a sitting person gets 2,000 amos. And the halacha is kedivrei hamekil when it comes to eruvin, right? The l'chayr, they both say the same thing. So we explained the reason with necessity. The first one was because what was the first one? The first one was because it was even though there was another case of basically it would be a chumrah, right? So therefore we say in this case that even though he goes against the rabbim, you go like the yachid. And this like Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri in this case. So that was the first teretz. So you go like the Yachid, like Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, and we wouldn't have thought that if he just said halacha divrei mekel be'eruvin. Now what's the second? Rav Papa Amar Yitzrich. Maybe only when we said the special halacha of kulas only comes to eruv v'chatzeros. Aval be'eruv tchumen. When it comes to tchumen, aimalo, maybe by eruv tchumen we're more machmer. So tzricha. Therefore, you need to say the halacha is like Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri. Even in this case, when it comes to, in this case, obviously an Erev Tchumen, because we're talking about how much, if does a person get 2,000 amos or not, as is Erev Tchumen. Now the Gemara says, okay, I never heard of a difference between Erev Chatzeros and Erev Tchumen. So where you have this precedence that we see that perhaps we're more machmir when it comes to Tchum versus Chatzeros. Remember, Erev Chatzeros are basically joining yards, so it's one area so a person can carry from one to the other. Erev Tchumen is basically the location where a person starts a Shabbos and where he's allowed to travel, right, not carrying anything, where he's allowed to travel over Shabbos. That's not, so where's the difference? That's how we learn in the Mishnah. Amar Rabbi Yehuda b'medvar murim. With what are we talking about? The Erev Tchumen. About Erev Chatzeros, Ma'arivin bein ladas bein shelo b'das. All right, so we're talking about a case of where the person is unaware whether an Erev is being done on his behalf, right? So we're only talking about Erev Tchumen, right? Erev Tchumen, he has to be aware. But when it comes to Erev Chatzeros, we are more mekel, right? So that you can make an Erev Chatzeros for someone, in other words, that if he didn't realize someone had Erev Chatzeros, you can make one on his behalf, and therefore he's able to go ahead and carry, right, from one rishus to the other. Bein ladas, bein shelo das. Whether he knows about it or not, shezach and adam shelo b'fanav, because you're allowed to go ahead and do something good for somebody, right? So if it's a zechus for him, you're allowed to do it without it, not in front of him, without his knowledge. Ve'ein chavin l'adam shelo b'fanav. But if it's something which is detrimental to that person, you can only do it with his knowledge and his approval. So obviously, to make an erev chatzeros, you would be allowed to do it without his knowledge, but erev tchumen, you would not be able to do it because it depends where the person wants to travel. So therefore, you can't make it Erev Tchumen. So we see over here that Tchumen were more machmir. So maybe we would have thought the Kula is by Erev and only applied to Erev Chatzeros, Kamash Malan, also by Erev Tchumen. Rav Ashi Amar, right, he gives a third teres, Yitzchak. You also need to tell us why. Maybe that which we said, the kula is only when it comes to the remnants of an Erev. In other words, the Erev started off and part of it was eaten or went missing and you only have a little bit left. But when it comes to starting an Erev, like where am I going to set up shop for my Erev Tchumen? Maybe I would say that we're more machmir, right? That maybe the halacha is not like Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri. Okay, so where do you have this precedence of this different halacha when it comes to, right? Basically, the halachas of basically a leftover erev, or if it goes missing, to basically establishing an erev. The Tanah we learn in the Mishnah. About when are we talking about when we make only when the beginning of the erev, shira erev. Right, but if it's only to start an erev, you need a certain amount, a certain shear, right? Whether it's kibetza or whatever the amount for that type of food is, you have to have only the beginning of a shira erev. But when it comes to the remnants, filu kolshu, any amount is okay. V'lo amru le'erev chatzeros, and the only reason why there is a requirement for erev chatzeros, ela kadei shaloi l'shakech tayras erev mina tinakas. Not only that children should not forget about it, but really when it comes to erev chatzeros, even if it goes missing, we don't care. It's not as important, but nevertheless, we required in order not to forget the Torah of Erev Chatzeros. But we didn't say that by Erev Tchumen. So we see the Erev Tchumen, right? So we see that over here, that the beginning of an Eruv is different than the end of the Eruv. So maybe that what you say we're more makel is only talking about the end of the Eruv, but not to establish an Eruv. Now we go into halachas of paskening. So Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi Zreika, Amru, halacha Rabbi Akiva mechavero. Right? So it says Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Zreika, anytime there's a machlekes between Rabbi Akiva and somebody else, we say halacha is like Rabbi Akiva. The Rabbi Yosi mechaverov, and even Rabbi Yosi versus others, even more than one. And Rabbi bechaver also machlekes is Rabbi and somebody else, halacha is like Rabbi. So lamai hilchasa. So knows why did Rabbi Yaakov say this halacha? So Rav Asi Omar halacha. He says this is halacha, and you can go ahead and go to the Batei Midrashos and teach this rule. This is a rule for all passing all halachas. Rabbi Chia bar Abba Omar matin. Rabbi Chia bar Abba says it's a matin. We lean that way. In other words, we don't go out and publicize it, but when it comes to passing halacha, we use these rules of halacha Rabbi Kiva mechaverov, the Rabbi Yosi mechaverov, right, and Rabbi mechaverov. And Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Chanina, Omar Nirin, he only used the lashon of Nirin. It appears that way. In other words, we don't publicize it. We don't even paskin it because of that way. But if one does go ahead and paskin, really without going through the cases, so then you could be soimech on, Rabbi Kiva Mechaverov, Rabbi Yosef Mechaverov, and Rabbi Mechaverov. I'm going to question on that. Kolashon Zam Rabbi Yaakov Aridi Am Rabbi Yechanan. So now another version is like this. So it says Rabbi Yaakov Aridi Am Rabbi Yechanan, Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Yehuda. If there's a machlokas between Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda, halacha Rabbi Yehuda. The halacha is like Rabbi Yehuda. Okay, Rabbi Yaisi. Excuse me, 1 second. I'm sorry, 1 second. Yeah, Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Yehuda, halacha Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yaisi. If there's machlokas between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yaisi. So halach Rabbi Yaisi, halach is like Rabbi Yaisi. Ein tzarich leimar Rabbi Meir Rabbi Yaisi halach Rabbi Yaisi. Right? And you don't have to tell me, right? Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yaisi, the halach is like Rabbi Yaisi, right? Because why? Because hashtem come Rabbi Yehuda less. Because when Rabbi Meir argued with if Rabbi Meir would argue with Rabbi Yehuda, right? Rabbi Yehuda would win. And so, but in Rabbi Yehuda, b'makom Rabbi Yaisi, right? Unless b'makom Rabbi Yaisi, maybe right? You have to ask in that case. In other words, right? Like 2 is bigger than 1, 3 is bigger than 2. Obviously, 3 is bigger than 1. So that would be the same case over here that you don't. So now basically it goes Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Yehuda, then Rabbi Yaisi. Now, and Omar Ravasi, Af Anan, Af Ani Loime, also a very similar teaching. Rabbi Yaisi, right, who we said was basically the strongest one, Rabbi Shimon. Halacha Rabbi Yaisi. The halacha is like Rabbi Yaisi. Right, he's still the strongest. The Amar Rabbi Abba, Rabbi Yechanan, Rabbi Yehuda of Rabbi Shimon. If it's Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon, halach Rabbi Yehuda. The halach is like Rabbi Yehuda, not like Rabbi Shimon. So hashtem Rabbi Yehuda lessa. If Rabbi Shimon is loses out to Rabbi Yehuda and Pasak, but Rabbi Yaisi boy, do you have to ask if with Rabbi Yaisi? Certainly Rabbi Yaisi is stronger than Rabbi Shimon. And Iboilu, Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Shimon, Mai. What about Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Shimon, right? Because Rabbi Yehuda and both Rabbi Yehuda was stronger than both of them. But what happens? Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Shimon argued. Then take you. Then we don't necessarily have a psak in that case. And Amar Rav Misharshia, however, Lasni Lahani Klali. We don't. This is not a rule. In other words, we don't necessarily just always oblige. This is the rule. It's not a rule that we apply to everything. So where does he know to say this? That it's not a rule. If it's from there, which we learn in the Mishnah, Rabbi Shimon Omer, but look at our Mishnah. Right? We talked about our Mishnah basically about 2 people, right? They started Shabbos and they were shtickle overlapping. They were overlapping. So any area that they overlap, they can use together. But if they, and then if there was a person in the middle and then 2 people on the sides, they could each use the person in the middle, but they can't go over that person and extend into the other. And we compared it to a case of like 3 different chatzeros that had an Erev chatzeros between them. So we said over there, and Rabbi Shimon Omer Labad Davar Daima. So what is this similar to? Right, like Gimel Chatzeros Hapsuchos Luzu 3 Chatzeros open to one another. Psuchos Rishus Rabbin open to Rishus Rabbin. Eruv V'Shtayim Chatzonos Imam Tzayus. So the 2 outer ones each had their own individual eruv with the middle one, and so he moteres imahen v'he moteres ima. Right, so they are mutter to go ahead and carry into that, and the middle one can carry out into either one of them. However, Shtayim Chatzonos also Zayimzu, but the 2 outer ones cannot go ahead and carry from all the way one to the other because they never had an eruv with one another. They just had an eruv with the one in the middle. The Amar Rab Chama Bar Guya Amar Rav Halach Rabbi Shimon says over there the halach is like Rabbi Shimon. Uman Poligale, and who argues within this case? Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda argues and says that the one side A can carry all the way to C. Right? That was Rabbi Yehuda, and we said right. Vaha Amarta Rabbi Yehuda Rabbi Shimon halach Rabbi Yehuda. You said the halacha between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon. The halacha is like Rabbi Yehuda. That should be mutter, but our Mishnah seems to paskin like Rabbi Shimon that it's usher. Because we use Lamad Davar Daima. So Ella, love, rather not Shmamina, less new. It must be that this rule is not a rule across the board. It's not always machlokas between Rabbi Shimon and Rabbi Yehuda, halachas like Rabbi Yehuda, because we see in this case halachas like Rabbi Shimon. So Gemara says, no, umay kusha, who's as a kasha? Dilma heichad itamar. All right, maybe if we have a case where we paskin the halacha like Rabbi Shimon, then it's no problem going like Rabbi Shimon. It's only in a case. But if there is a case where we don't know who we paskin like, then we apply the rule. So maybe that's how it works. In this case, we have basically a masora that the halacha is like Rabbi Shimon. But if we don't know the psak, then you apply the rules. So maybe Rosh Hashanah is wrong. So another proof. In this case, the time we learned in the Mishnah, Ir shel yachid v'nasis shel rabbin. If you have a city, it was almost going to be a public city. It was almost going to be large enough, let's say 600,000, and then it became large enough. The Nasis Shel Rabbim Ma'arvin Es Kula. then you can go ahead and put an Erev on the entire city because it still has the shame of a smaller city, despite the fact that it might be 600,000. But we'll see this later on. But nevertheless, we can go ahead and put an Erev without surrounding the entire city. The Nasis, however, you have Rabbi Nasis Shel Yachid, but let's say it was large, right? This was a large city, and then it became smaller. The Nasis Shel Yachid, Ein Marvin es Kula, you can't put an Erev around it because people think you're making an Erev around the Shus. So Rabbi, El Imkein Oisa Chutzala Keir Chadasha, unless you basically carve out a part of it, which is basically like a new city, Shabi Yehuda, which is in Yehuda, Sheyesh Bo Chamishim Dir. Dir Rabbi Yehuda says Rabbi Yehuda, you have to carve out a place, an area where 50 people live. So you can put an Erev on the whole city, but just carve out a little bit so people won't think you're making an Erev around the whole public area, because it's not really a public area, but people think it's a public area. So therefore, carve out a little bit and carve out 50 people. And that was the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. And Rabbi Shimon, Rabbi Shimon says, no, shloish chatzeros shel shnei batim. You don't have to cut out 50 people, just cut out 3 chatzeros, each consisting of 2 houses, basically with a total of 6. The Amar Rav Chama bar Guri Amar Rav halach Rabbi Shimon says that the halach is like Rabbi Shimon. So what do you mean? I thought Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon halach Rabbi Yehuda. So how do we go like Rabbi Shimon in this case? Uman Polygon. Who's the machlokes of Rabbi Yehuda? I Lamarta Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Shimon halach Rabbi Yehuda. Didn't you say the halach is like Rabbi Yehuda was the machlokes? So the Gemara says no. Umay kushya. What's the contradiction here? Dilma halchanami. Same thing we just said before. Heichad itamar, where we have a psak halachas Rabbi Shimon. Itamar was said over there, and therefore it's not a contradiction. However, heichad itamar. But if there was no stated halacha, lo itamar, then we don't know what the halacha is like, and then you apply the rule of machlokes between Rabbi Shimon and Rabbi Yehuda, halacha Rabbi Yehuda. So what is the proof of Misharshia? We'll see that tomorrow. Meretz Hashem will leave off over here at the top there. Shkoyach, everybody.
Shkoyach, Rabbi. Have a great day, Rabbi.
Have a wonderful day, and enjoy the beautiful weather, and stay safe.
Amen.
All right.